It's so different than most other creatures living on this planet. It really is like seeing something from another world or from the distant past in a modern time.
In 1726, Swiss zoologist Johann Jakob Schweitzer finds an impossible fossil in Germany. It doesn't look like any creature he's seen before. Scientists in the 1700s didn't believe in extinction, so they weren't sure what to make of something like this. Some said that it was a lizard or a fish, but Schweitzer claimed that this was the skeleton of a human killed by the biblical flood. In the 1790s, French zoologist Georges Cuvier published a paper comparing the skeletons of mammoths and elephants, proving that they were different and mammoths were gone. He did the same for giant ground sloths, pterodactyls, mosasaurs, proving the very concept of extinction. In 1811, Cuvier takes a closer look at Schweitzer's fossil, and he concludes that the fossil represents not a human, fish, or lizard, but an extinct giant salamander. Yet another bizarre creature from the distant past, long gone from our world today.
There are river systems already lost. So you've got 23 million years, a couple of decades, they've basically been wiped out.
I always think about Salamander 24 hours, 365 days per year.
How many videos of salamanders do you think you have on your phones?
I never counted, baby. One. In my dream, I searched the giant salamander. Oh, this is a salamander place, but I can't find it. 1 million? Yeah, maybe.
Why is this a good place to come and find a giant salamander?
Yeah, because there's relatively big agriculture dam, so they can't go upstream. But in other aspects, fish also difficult to go upstream. So maybe they can get fish easily. Yeah.
The majority of Japan is covered by steep mountains, some rising over 3,000 meters high. The climate is rainy, especially up here, carving fast-flowing rivers prone to flash floods. Water from the mountains drains into the flatter valleys below. Japan spans over 3,000 kilometers north to south. In the north, it's subarctic, brown bears, salmon, puffins, sea lions. In the south, subtropical, sea turtles, coral reefs, dolphins. During ice ages, sea levels dropped, connecting parts of Japan to the mainland and allowing species to cross over from Korea, Taiwan, and Siberia. When the climate warmed and sea levels rose, they became isolated, evolving into species distinct from those on the mainland, like the Japanese otter and tanuki. This is the boundary between two of Japan's main islands, Honshu and Hokkaido. They're really close together, but the channel between them is over 200 meters deep. So even when sea levels fell, these islands were separated. The result is a strikingly different suite of animals. Black bears and Japanese wolves in the south, brown bears and Hokkaido wolves in the north. The endemic Japanese macaque and serow are only found to the south. One endemic salamander in Hokkaido, all of the others to the south. Japan is made up of thousands of islands, including volcanic islands that have never been connected to the mainland. Millions of years of isolation has caused them to evolve completely unique ecosystems. The Nansei Shoto in the south has also been shaped by deep ocean channels. North of the Tokara Strait, the ecosystem overlaps with mainland Japan. South of the Karama Gap, it's more like Taiwan. The islands in between have been isolated for millions of years, evolving countless endemic species, including the flightless Okinawa rail, only discovered in 1981, and new species are still being described here. This incredible variation in climate, land bridges, islands, volcanic activity, connection, and isolation. These are the factors that have given Japan one of the most diverse collections of animals on the planet. Over 170 mammals, 50 of them endemic. In flat valleys and along the coast, wetlands provide key habitat for insects and migrating birds. The rainy forests and mountain streams are amphibian heaven. Japan has nearly 50 frogs and over 60 salamanders, almost all of them endemic, including the giant salamander. They're found in mountain streams in central Japan, spending the day hiding in burrows along the riverbank and emerging at night to hunt. They can live for over 100 years and grow up to 5 feet long. During the breeding season, they migrate upstream to spawn.
So we're in a feeder river within the Nawa River basin.
So there's like a perfect giant salamander habitat.
Absolutely. There's lots of rocks of various sizes, so salamanders can shelter during heavy rains, but also during the daytime. The riverbanks aren't concreted up, so they can also make nests. There's lots of fish, crabs, and other prey items. The flow of the river doesn't get so intense. It's a stable environment for amphibians.
How common is a habitat like this throughout Japan?
At this altitude is extremely rare.
First day in what sounds like just an absolutely magical place, almost too good to be true. It's a sacred mountain covered with old growth forests, with clean water providing a critical refuge for Japanese giant salamanders.
Someone told me about a teaching program in Japan. A few months later, I was here in Tottori Prefecture. And I've been here 18 of the last 20 years. On my first time in the river, I got to see a giant salamander, and it turned and slowly moved up through my legs, brushing past my boot, and then slowly moved away. That flicked a switch in my brain. My non-profit organization, Sustainable Dyson's focus for now at least is on the Nawa River basin. There's cool, oxygen-rich water running all the way to the ocean. They can survive and breed at very low altitudes. However, because it's lower altitude, that means there's more people, more agriculture, more industry, etc., and more disturbance. So there's a lot more problems.
Around 13,000 years ago, Japan's hunter-gatherers began transitioning to a more sedentary lifestyle. Many lived near the coast or rivers, relying on resources from the water, but choosing village sites carefully to avoid flooding. Around 2,500 years ago, rice was introduced from the mainland. Over several centuries, it spread throughout the country and became Japan's main food source. Valleys were cleared of their forests to make room. Growing rice requires a lot of water, so people used earth, stones, or wood to build small dams, irrigation channels, and embankments along the river's edges. In the 7th century, they began damming valleys to fill reservoirs. As the valleys got more crowded, flooding became a hazard. So they built more canals to guide floodwater away from villages, and small dams to slow water down. Picture rolling something down a set of stairs instead of a ramp. Water became a key transportation network, connecting Kyoto to trade ports at the coast and logging operations in the mountains. Rivers were dredged out to make room for boats and rafts. Dams kept sediment out of the lower reaches of rivers so ships could navigate them. River courses were straightened or redirected entirely. By the 1600s, around 30 million people lived here. Growing Japan's population to this size meant clearing forests, draining wetlands, utilizing every inch of flat land available, and reshaping how water moved.
is just after the breeding season. Actually, this season is the most difficult season to find giant salamander because breeding behavior is very tough work for them. So I guess after that tough working, they want to take a rest. So most of them take a rest in the hole. Giant salamander won't go upstream to find a good breeding nest before the breeding season. Breeding nest is very special, restricted, a special place. So they have to reach to that place in urban river near my house. 2 years ago, we could make sure they're breeding, but last year, this year, I can't find any breeding behavior itself. No giant salamanders gathering in the den.
You've been in the water for 10 seconds. Lima just spotted a salamander.
I did! I found one!
Japanese know giant salamanders over 1,000 ago. There is a book about giant salamander, so people know the giant salamander itself.
Japan's culture has evolved in much the same way as its nature. People and ideas have crossed over from different parts of the mainland and evolved in isolation. That isolation was particularly intense under the Tokugawa shogunate, beginning in the 1600s. No one in, no one out. The only exception was Dejima Island, this tiny Dutch trading post. Merchants brought their doctors with them, including Philip Franz von Siebold. He arrived in 1823 and began trading his knowledge of Western science and medicine for information and permission to travel. He hired Japanese collectors to track down rare plants and animals, shipping hundreds of specimens back to Europe. In 1829, the Japanese government suspected Siebold was a spy and deported him. He took a giant salamander home with him, the first ever seen alive outside Japan. For European zoologists, this was insane. Turns out, Schweitzer's fossil wasn't some extinct beast from the distant past. Dozens of scholars wrote about the new species. Some compared it to historical accounts from China, accounts of a giant four-legged river fish. Giant salamanders were shipped to zoos in London, Paris, Berlin, Frankfurt, Vienna, Hamburg. At the same time, Spain was strengthening colonial control of the Philippines. Britain was colonizing India, the Dutch were colonizing Indonesia, and France was beginning to colonize Cambodia, Vietnam, and Laos. China also had a policy of isolation. Beginning in 1840, British warships forcefully reopened ports and took control of trade. In the following decades, other countries got involved. France, Russia, the US, Spain, Italy, Germany, Denmark, Belgium, Austria-Hungary, Netherlands. By the end of the century, about 90 Chinese ports were open and controlled by foreign powers. Understandably, many in Japan feared that they were next. In 1868, a political revolution ousted the shogun and declared a new government, aiming to modernize, industrialize, and westernize, to resist the Western powers by beating them at their own game. They reorganized the government, prioritized rapid economic growth, invested in infrastructure, including beginning to use cement for their dams and canals, and they embraced Western science. Scientists flocked to Japan to study its endemic species. In 1869, a French zoologist found a giant salamander in the mountains of western China, the first European documentation. 2 years later, another French zoologist compared giant salamanders from Japan and China and claimed that they were two different species. Most scholars were quick to dismiss that claim. Japanese scientist Sasaki Chijiro published new findings on giant salamanders' reproduction. Ishikawa Chiyamatsu made expeditions into remote mountainous regions of Japan to study giant salamanders, publishing his findings in European journals. He recounts stories from people in the mountain villages, what he describes as ancient fairy tales. To quote, "Many people believe in the presence of colossal salamanders and misfortunes caused by them. I was once told that in a deep spot upstream, a huge animal lived, which once swallowed a woman and her child."
There is a very interesting story. Huge giant salamanders over 10 meters. All the people eaten by huge giant salamander. The brave young man killed the salamander, but he killed by the ghost of the salamander, and also his family, local people, made the shrine to calm the ghost of the giant salamander. Very special place.
Ishikawa also describes being served giant salamander meat, cooked in miso soup, simmered in shoyu, or fried. He claims that salamanders are hunted in large numbers, eaten as a delicacy, and used for traditional medicine. He writes of rivers where giant salamanders were once as common as frogs, but today are rare. In some, they've nearly disappeared. At the same time, Chinese scientists were studying their own giant salamanders. In the 1930s, they began claiming that the Chinese version was a unique subspecies, but most scientists in Europe and Japan continued to dismiss those claims. Liu Chengchao studied amphibians and taught at a university near Shanghai. In 1937, Liu became a refugee. He spent 73 days trekking nearly 2,000 miles to Chengdu at the foot of China's western mountains. Ironically, he had always dreamed of visiting this region and studying its amphibians. He took refuge here for 8 years, making expeditions into the surrounding mountains, finding new species, and writing a detailed text on the amphibians of western China, including giant salamanders. The book makes a bold claim that the Chinese giant salamander is not the same species as the Japanese giant salamander, not even a subspecies, but an entirely distinct species. Around the same time, Aikio Sato was writing a similar book about the salamanders of Japan, conducting extensive fieldwork throughout the country and its colonies. He wrote in detail about giant salamanders, including their breeding behavior. He theorized about Japan's biogeography, the variations in climate, the deep ocean channels, the ice ages, the islands. The book was completed in 1943, with about 1,000 copies printed by a publisher in Osaka. In the spring of 1945, the US began bombing Osaka. Most copies of Sato's book were destroyed. On August 6, 1945, Sato was commuting to his lab in Hiroshima. Sato's lab, his specimen collection, and the original version of his book were destroyed. He suffered burns and radiation poisoning and died 5 days later. The Second World War left Japan with a weak economy, flattened infrastructure, and food shortages. The government poured money into flood control, agriculture, hydropower, and water, building thousands of dams and canals. In 1951, Japan's government took action to address the overhunting of giant salamanders for food and medicine by designating the species as a natural monument. Even just touching a giant salamander without a special license was now illegal. In 1973, a businessman in Okayama, let's say, spotted a loophole. He imported about 800 giant salamanders from China keeping them in captivity and selling them to fancy restaurants for food. Because the animals weren't from Japan, they weren't legally protected. Before long, the government shut the operation down.
Probably some of that animal escaped or released.
At the start of the 2000s, DNA testing was allowing researchers to study salamander populations in more detail. It revealed new species and subspecies, and proved without a doubt that Chinese and Japanese giant salamanders were two separate species. In 2005, a DNA study recorded Chinese giant salamanders in the Kamo River in Kyoto. In 2008, the same researchers published the first evidence that Chinese and Japanese giant salamanders were hybridizing.
The Chinese giant salamanders and the Japanese giant salamanders are capable of breeding, so you've got hybrid salamanders.
A study published the next year found that 3/4 of the Kamo River's giant salamanders were either Chinese or hybrids. The year after that, it was 86 out of 87.
Hybrid animal is so strong and so active.
Far more aggressive than either of the parent species.
They can move very long distance. That is not like pure giant salamander.
Eat more food, grow quicker, fight stronger and harder. And the way the breeding biology works is that males will fight to control a breeding nest.
So it's difficult for pure giant salamander to win the hybrid.
There are river systems already lost.
Is there a risk of them expanding into other rivers?
Yeah, in the future, many places probably, hybrid animal can spread.
The Japanese giant salamander has been in its present form morphologically for around 23 million years. If the hybrids take over, that ancient lineage is lost. So the species is lost.
What can be done to mitigate the spread?
So difficult. One big female can breed over 1,000 eggs. If 1% of that offspring can grow up 10
Right.
hybrid animal spread, so it is so difficult. All we can do is to get rid of the hybrid animal from the wild.
Japan has an aging population, so more old people and very few children. Empty elementary schools and nursery schools all around Japan, and a lot of those have swimming pools. So they've been filling up these swimming pools. It has become so expensive just to keep them alive, and plus the conditions they're in is really unnatural and awful. It's not the hybrids' fault that they're hybrids, right? This area has no known records of hybrids yet.
Even in the rivers the hybrids haven't reached, giant salamanders are still at risk.
This is what's called a weir, or an agricultural dam, basically a wall within the river system.
In Japan, we have also concentrated heavy rain. Giant salamander also washed away. They can't go up to the agricultural dam, so many giant salamanders stopped.
If the sides of the river were kind of natural around it, then they would be able to come out and around. But always there's high concrete walls. They will spend night after night trying to get up. It's very common to find quite severe injuries to their feet.
Giant salamander won't go upstream to find a good breeding nest before the breeding season. There are many dams, so they can't go back. So they move gradually downriver. Some females spawn the egg just down place of the dam, but that is not good place, so the eggs washed away.
Nearly every river in Japan has been dammed. Even deep in the mountains, small dams for flood control are everywhere.
In just this short section of river, I counted 53 of these walls. And each one of those walls is a barrier which restricts them moving to suitable breeding grounds. And it also means one step closer to the ocean. And once they get into brackish water, sooner or later they're dead.
In Hiroshima several years ago, we found one big giant salamander 3 kilometers from the sea place. We moved the animal to the zoo, but a few weeks later the animal passed away. Probably have a bad effect of salt. Probably many giant salamander washed away. People don't notice. So we have to make a gentle slope.
This is an example of quite an effective ramp that we built ourselves. So we basically piled up huge amounts of rock into the corner here, so a salamander climb up on its own accord.
It really is this simple, a little concrete ramp for each little concrete dam. So what's the holdup?
Most of the river is government, so government have to manage the river environment. So we have to get government permission, and Japanese government want to follow the another example. It's difficult to do the fast action. It's difficult to gather much money.
I managed to get a meeting with the top politician for this region. We demonstrated to him that this situation could be largely fixed by installing ramps. In his opinion, there wouldn't be enough public interest and therefore there's no money. Our plan is to privately fund ramp installation all the way to the ocean and then all the way up where they can move to a beautiful natural habitat to breed. We ask the construction companies to come and give us a quote, and then we find a private sponsor for each and every weir. So it could be a private company, it could be a Saudi prince, it could be an elementary school in Wyoming that does a readathon. I have no idea why I say Wyoming, by the way. Or you could sit in a bathtub of maggots for a week for sponsorship. Whatever it takes. They're always trying to feed this construction industry beast. So we're actually feeding the beast, but in a way that's actually beneficial to the environment for a pleasant change.
Dams aren't just bad for salamanders. They allow sediment to accumulate and alter the flow of the river, degrading the entire ecosystem.
The rivers, apart from one or two that flow into specific areas, have almost zero protection. It's no use just to focus, don't touch the animal, don't hunt the animal, if all around them concrete has been poured.
Dam construction peaked in the 1960s and has been declining since. As the population leveled out and eventually started to decline, demand for water followed. Also, so many dams had already been constructed that there just weren't many places left to put them. Today, many dams are aging and becoming expensive to maintain. And in 2003, Japan's first ever dam removal was announced.
I would like to say, yes, we can convince the government that they're important enough to do something about. It's clear that the government systems in place are 100% ineffective.
Japanese giant salamander is designated natural special monument. So giant salamander is a cultural living. So the staff of the culture organization do giant salamanders working. They don't have a special knowledge for the biology. In Japan, we don't have specific biologists in the government. Probably many government staff doesn't know the present situation where we have good culture. So bottom-up approach is a very important approach to promote the conservation activity. The Zoological Park Hiroshima developed the artificial nest. After they succeeded in the zoo facility, they put the artificial nest in the wild as well, and they also succeeded in breeding in the wild as well. River environment is very difficult. Many sand compiles. The staff and the local people clean the nest before the breeding season every year. Every year, early September is their breeding timing. This year, breeding behavior is delayed 1 week. Probably the high temperature of these summers delays the Salamanders breeding. In Japan, we have also concentrated heavy rain. In the past, that is very long time, once a long time. But now, every year, we had many severe damage of flooding and heavy rain. I worry about in the future if the Japanese summer becomes hotter and hotter. I think many can breed in the future.
Overhunting and habitat loss have tanked populations of brown bears, black bears, sea otters, seals. Loss of lowland forests and wetlands has reduced populations of serow, migratory birds, and so many others. On smaller islands, introduction of invasive predators threatens countless endemic species. The Hokkaido wolf was hunted to extinction by the end of the 1800s, and the last recorded Japanese wolf was shot in 1905. The last Japanese sea lion was recorded in 1974, and in 2012, the Japanese otter was declared extinct. The Ministry of Environment lists about a fifth of Japan's reptiles and birds as extinct, endangered, or vulnerable, a quarter of fish, and a third of mammals and amphibians.
Things are disappearing, and that's such a shame for future generations that it's going to be pretty much wiped out by one generation. People have made mistakes in the past, but for me it's like, okay, what's in the past is in the past. How do we change it now?
I think we have to make some protected area. Now there's no like this protected places. In my opinion, we gather some wild animal and bred in artificial condition and spread some animal. When they are young stage, the mortality is very high. So to take care of them for several years, and after that they release. Maybe in the future we should do like that activity.
A large focus of what we do is on the whole environment. How are the forests at the side of the river? How about farming practices? What waste is going in? How is the water quality affected by what's around the river?
It's a good habitat we have to conserve, and for the bad environment we have to modify them.
Thanks to decades of work from conservationists, things are slowly but surely improving for many of Japan's endangered species. But for others, the country is at a crossroads. Invest heavily in protecting habitat and controlling invasive species, or allow some of the planet's most unique creatures to disappear.
I strongly believed that I could do something. So therefore, it's my responsibility to do it. And if I don't do it, then I'm also responsible for the death of the giant salamanders in this river. It's been equally frustrating, depressing, inspiring, wonderful.
We have very good culture of giant salamander. We have many books, and we have festival of giant salamander. We have song. Many Japanese loves animal.
Super cute.
Yes,
Ah.
yeah.
Endangered Japanese toad.
One species of snake like to eat this toad. That species got the poison from this toad.
Huh.
Mm,
Fascinating.
yeah.
Despite all the rumors and legends of this river dragon or whatever, they're really chilled creatures, and I've had the honor to be able to research them, and it's important to check their feet, for example. If I'm gentle and soft, they will let me count their toes with my hand under the water. So these gentle, beautiful dinosaurs, it's so different than most other creatures living on this planet. It really is like seeing something from another world or from the distant past in a modern time.
There's one species, but they live a lot of habitat from very tiny to very big river. So I want to know their adaptation. Their lifespan is so long. So I want to know their behavior in each life stage. I want to know all the night behavior. Yeah, I want to know all the aspects of them. I'm not sure why I love giant salamander like this. So I want to know the reason